Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. All right. Thank you all for coming. You swelled the crowd by a lot. On behalf of First Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbus, I welcome you to our Sunday service. I'm Reverend Kathleen Fowler, your pastoral care minister. I've been attending this congregation for almost 30 years. We gather in the homelands of the Adena, the Hopewell, the Wyandot, the Miami, the Seneca, and the Cayuga peoples. Let us take a moment of silence together to express our gratitude and appreciation for the connections of indigenous people to this place. Thank you. Sue will now lead us in our opening hymn, Gather the Spirit, and the words will appear on the screen. So it's number 347 in our gray or teal hymnal, if you'd like those words.
Please be seated. And now for a special announcement from the board, or many special announcements.
Hello. My name is Cindy Wicker. I am a member of the First UU Board of Trustees. My pronouns are she and her. Welcome to the final service of our series of summer services. We were excited to introduce guest speakers and ministers who presented a variety of topics and ideas. Today, our worship presents the State of the Union. We are glad you joined us today in person or online. Please let us know you are here today by filling out our check-in form online or at the greeter stand. This simple act helps us maintain connections within our congregation. You can access a digital order of service, the Joys and Sorrows form, and our donation page by scanning the QR code up there at the top, or by visiting firstucolumbus.org/Sunday. We also have pen and paper Joys and Sorrow cards, which you can submit at the candle table in the back of the sanctuary. We have a couple of announcements this morning. Help Sukkot Shalom, thank you all for your generous donations to help Bahat Farah and the kids move to their new home in Columbus, but they could use some more help. Right now, the family is still in a motel, waiting to get started with their new life. Finding a new home for them has proven more difficult than anticipated. We need an apartment or house for them to live in ASAP. The family has the first 6 months of rent. Ideally, the place will be Northeast Columbus, Linden area, or Columbus, Worthington, Clintonville area. That is a 1 to 3 bedroom at a minimum of at a maximum of $1,200 a month, preferably with utilities included. Our first annual Fall Engagement Fall will take place on Sunday, September 18th. Join us in Beach Hall to find out what our First UU groups have going on this year. I would now like to invite our children who would like to help light our chalice by bringing in the light to meet Nikki in the back of the sanctuary. All right, looks like we're finding Nikki. And go out into the welcome hall to prepare. Our young people will return in just a few minutes. Let us center ourselves as we listen to this morning's prelude.
Will the children please come forward? Our chalice lighting words this morning are from Florence Kaplow, entitled Honoring Our Labors. In recognition of Labor Day, we light this flame to honor all work, including the work of our hands and our backs, in gratitude for all the labors that support our world, and for all those who boldly continue the work of justice, equity, and peace. Our chalice is lit. Thank you, Esther.
Good morning. We are currently putting together Sunday school teaching teams for next year. Please email Amber at firstuucolumbus.org to get involved. You're really needed. Today's story is Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type, by Doreen Cronin, with pictures by Betsy Lewin. Farmer Brown has a problem. His cows like to type. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. At first, he couldn't believe his ears. Cows that type? Impossible. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. Then he couldn't believe his eyes. Dear Farmer Brown, the barn is very cold at night. We'd like some electric blankets. Sincerely, the cows. It was bad enough the cows had found the old typewriter in the barn. Now they wanted electric blankets. No way, said Farmer Brown. No electric blankets. So the cows went on strike. They left a note on the barn door. Sorry, we're closed. No milk today. No milk today, cried Farmer Brown. In the background, he heard the cows busy at work. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. The next day, he got another note. Dear Farmer Brown, the hens are cold too. They'd like electric blankets. Sincerely, the cows. The cows were growing impatient with the farmer. They left a new note on the door. Closed. No milk, no eggs. No eggs, cried Farmer Brown. In the background, he heard them. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. Clickety, clack, moo. Cows that type, hens on strike? Who ever heard of such a thing? How can I run a farm with no milk and no eggs? Farmer Brown was furious. Farmer Brown got out his own typewriter. Dear cows and hens, there will be no electric blankets. You are cows and hens. I demand milk and eggs. Sincerely, Farmer Brown. Now, Duck was a neutral party, so he brought the ultimatum to the cows. The cows held an emergency meeting. All the animals gathered around the barn to snoop, but none of them could understand moo. All night long, Farmer Brown waited for an answer. Duck knocked on the door early the next morning. He handed Farmer Brown a note. Dear Farmer Brown, we will exchange our typewriter for electric blankets. Leave them outside the barn door, and we will send Duck over with the typewriter. Sincerely, the cows. Farmer Brown decided this was a good deal. He left the blankets next to the barn door and waited for Duck to come with the typewriter. The next morning, he got a note. Dear Farmer Brown, the pond is quite boring. We'd like a diving board. Sincerely, the ducks. Click, clack, quack. Click, clack, quack. Click, clack, whack. The end. So there are many morals to this story, but the shortest one is we can't always get everything we want, but when we work to find an agreement, negotiation, on both sides, we might have to give up something that's not so important to get something that we really want and really need. And now the children can go back to their families. There is no RE today because it's a holiday weekend. And stay seated and we will sing them off. Beneath our arms we shelter you. You warm our hearts as you pass through. May our love guide you as you go to help you learn and help you grow. And now I'm changing hats. Our dear dynamic Ron Payne is sick today and just couldn't be here, and so a number of us are filling in for the things that he was going to help out with. I'm Kitty Palmhauser, and I have been a member here for 34 years. Our centering words this morning are by Steve Abbott, longtime member of this church and a retired college professor, a union steward, board chair, worship team leader, and Sunday morning worship service planner and presenter, as well as coffee maker, usher, and poet. We are here on a gray Sunday morning to bring our individual lives into the light of this larger shared community. And as we do so, may we each be grateful for this day. May we have wisdom to understand what is right and just. May we have courage to act on that wisdom. May we have humility in speaking and acting upon our varied truths. May we have compassion to help us understand others, especially those whom we might see as enemies. May we have patience to temper our earnest desire for a more just and caring world. May we have hope to see beyond our disappointments and losses, and to encourage us on our way. May we have joy in recognizing the beauty in the everyday, the significance of each breathing moment, and the importance of those closest to us.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. My name is Sue Ann Farnlocker. My pronouns are her and she, and I'm a 50-year member of this church. My father, a high school American history teacher, was a firm believer in trade unions. I was a social worker for the city of Columbus for 26 years, but once, after 5 years without raises, watching the paraprofessional staff we worked with get their raises, we voted to join their union, the Communications Workers of America. I was a card-carrying union member. But when I moved to Columbus in '74, I worked for a temp agency. My first night at a all-night shift plastics factory maker, they put me on a machine that had a press and a blade, and I was working, trying to negotiate the pedals, and I caught my 3 fingers in the press. It almost cut off the tip of one. And when I went back for paperwork, workers' comp, I didn't get workers' comp. Well, anyway, I went back for paperwork. One guy said, "Oh, they put you on fingers." So no safety equipment, nothing in place. It was a long time ago. Manufacturing jobs peaked in the late 70s. Between 80 and 2017, we lost roughly 7 million jobs and shifted from manufacturing jobs 30 years ago to this wretched service industry. Ordinary people work 2 or 3 jobs and still can't make a living wage. Students are saddled with impossible debt. Homelessness, hunger, and poverty are all at record highs. All while corporations make the rules, and now wealth is concentrated at the top. Compounding all of this, 9/11, our tax dollars fund the powerful military-industrial complex, while the wealthy's taxes decreased dramatically. The read my lips, no new taxes has made teachers use their own money for students' essential supplies. They can't even use the bathroom during class time and are mandated to teach only for proficiency tests and forced to teach things they totally disagree with. NPR reported U.S. citizens gave labor unions the highest approval rating in the last 57 years, with 71% of Americans in favor of unions. Only 10% are in unions, though. When I Googled the words labor unions and social justice, the first thing that popped up was the University of Maryland Art Library exhibit entitled "For Liberty, Justice, and Equality, Unions Making History in America." These are the first 2 sentences in the description. Labor unions were created by workers to protect their rights. Less recognized is labor's role in advancing civil liberties, social justice, and economic equality for all Americans. The labor movement has always supported the quest for economic justice, including demands for an 8-hour workday and a living wage. From the beginning of the 20th century, organized labor has championed religious freedom and the evolving demands of the environment. By the end of the century, the labor movement consistently promoted international human rights. In contrast, people of color, women, immigrants, and LGBT community face exclusion, segregation, and discrimination by unions. These groups created their own organizations, fought for inclusion, and pushed the labor movement to broaden its central principles of liberty, justice, and equality. In the 21st century, organized labor has become an advocate for the rights of these communities, including anti-discrimination, civil rights legislation, marriage equality, and protections for undocumented workers. Unions make democracy work. These inequities fly in the face of our 7 principles. If the state of labor isn't a social justice issue, then I don't know what social justice is.
This brief reading is by Warren Buffett. There's class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning.
Homo sapiens came into existence roughly 10 million years ago. Some anthropologists theorize their cooperation and working together actually jump-started our evolution. The first work, of course, was just basic survival. Eventually, some individuals showed specific skills identifying edible or medicinal plants, gathering them, and through cultivation, developed grain from mere grasses. This was a huge step for early hominids. Anthropologists believe women were these resourceful gardeners. Men, mostly the hunters, adeptly made flint tools sharp enough to skin, cut up, slaughter even mammoths, and haul large carcasses and body parts great distances. Challenges of providing enough food, bones, or hides for clothing made it necessary for the whole group to contribute. There was no leisure class. Eventually, skilled specialists produced articles for barter, trade, or art, and weren't directly related to food. But a leader was needed to organize and direct because food had to be equitably distributed. Thus, another division of labor came into being. Though tribal societies developed a rudimentary form of government with a patriarch or matriarch directing the tribe over eons, rulers emerged along with social classes. Fast forward to Mesopotamia and Egypt. Historian and political scientist Karl Wittfogel, in his 1957 book, Oriental Despotism, theorized the development of irrigation projects led to the use of mass labor, and an impersonal government became a permanent institution. Sadly, at the bottom of this new order were the slaves, most likely originated as war captives or ruined debtors. While slavery is evident in cultures throughout human history, its use by Europeans in their colonization of the Americas imposed radical changes to the organization of work. Slavery began here as early as 1518 in the southern colonies, when Spanish government granted a license to import 4,000 African slaves into their colonies. It started in the north in 1619. Not only were Americans slaves, but also the long-suffering indigenous people were too. Finally, in the 1700s, another major historical change in the organization of work started in Britain, US, and then in the US. This was the onset of the Great Industrial Revolution. But conditions in these factories were determined by the owners. Conditions for men, women, and very young children were brutal and unforgiving.
The second reading is by Eugene Debs, a charismatic labor leader, arrested many times, convicted of sedition, and 5-time presidential candidate. He wrote this in September 1918. I am opposed to a social order in which it is possible for one man to do absolutely nothing that is useful to amass a fortune of millions of dollars, while millions of men and women who work all of the days of their lives to secure barely enough for a wretched existence.
The journey to gain justice for working people has lasted for centuries. Improved working conditions went hand in hand with expanded voting rights. The more people who could vote, meaning workers, the more government supported workers' rights. I will offer a few examples of these struggles. Historically, workers often worked 14 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Safety regulations did not exist. Small children worked alongside adults, often doing very dangerous jobs. In the 1830s and 40s, workers actually struck for a 10-hour working day. New Hampshire heard their plea and enacted a 10-hour day law. In the 1870s, the 15th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1870, granted African American men the right to vote and stated, "The right to vote may not be abrogated by color." Fighting for better working conditions was not necessarily a safe proposition. In 1877, 19 Irish coal miners, known as the Molly Maguires, were hanged in Pennsylvania. Coal wars continued for decades, and they continue to this day. In 1886, the American Federation of Labor was founded. That same year, mine owners hired guards and goons to break the strikes, and many were killed. In January of 1890, the United Mine Workers of America was founded in Columbus, Ohio. Workers continued to organize. In 1894, a boycott of the Pullman sleeping cars staffed by black men led to a general railroad strike. Years later, Congress passed the Railway Labor Act, which set up procedures to settle railway labor disputes and forbade discrimination against union members. In 1909, 20,000 female shirtwaist makers in New York City struck against sweatshop conditions. But only 2 years later, a fire in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory killed 150 women. Doors were locked, even those to the fire escapes. In 1910, the Industrial Commission declared unions good for democracy. In 1912, the Bread and Roses strike began by immigrant women in Lowell, Massachusetts, with 23,000 women, men, and children taking part. By the end of that congressional session, in 1912, Congress passed a bill creating the Department of Labor. And the following year, President Woodrow Wilson appointed the first Secretary of Labor, William B. Wilson, founder of the United Mine Workers of America. Labor disputes and strikes continued. In 1919, one of every 5 workers took part in the Great Strike Wave. One famous battle in southern West Virginia in 1920, known as the Matewan Massacre, occurred when 11 miners were killed and many injured. A film, October Sky, was even made of that battle. In 1920, the 19th Amendment, finally, after decades of struggle, gave women the right to vote. The Roaring Twenties occurred, probably a reaction to World War I. The Great Depression hit. It was the worst economic downturn in the history of industrialized world. Millions of people lost their entire life savings and were put out of work. It lasted from 1929 to 1939. From 33 to 39, under President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Congress passed the New Deal, which was a series of programs, public work projects, financial reforms, and regulations designed to get people back to work. In 1935, Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act, the foundational statute of labor law that guarantees the right of private sector employees to organize into trade unions, engage in collective bargaining, and take collective action such as strikes. That same year, the Social Security Act was passed. Following in 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act established the first minimum wage, 25 cents an hour, and a 40-hour week. According to SERI, the federal rate is now $9.30. The history of child labor has a long U.S. history, even before we became a country. Many legislative attempts were tried, some succeeded and some failed. The Fair Labor Standards Act is the primary act dealing with child labor, and it is amended from time to time. The Taft-Hartley Act of 1946 restricted the activities of union members. Right-to-work laws limited the power of unions and tended to lower wages. An order by President John Kennedy gave federal workers the right to bargain. In 1963, the March on Washington called for jobs and justice. The 1974 Civil Rights Act is a landmark civil right and labor law that outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. We haven't kept up with that, have we? Labor disputes continue and the battle goes on. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Linda Thompson, a member of 40 years, and I am a member of the worship team, the historian, a member of the archives team, and a member of the Chalice Choir, and a past board member. And I'm very happy to be a member of this church. Now, while Nathan plays the prelude, if you want, you may stand up and stretch your legs. So stand up.
Nathan, you have a cheering section. Our next reading is from St. Francis of Assisi. He who works with his hands is a laborer. He who works with his hands and his head is a craftsman. He who works with his hands and his head and his heart is an artist.
Hi, I'm Barbara Fiorini, and I am reading a reading by Victoria Yanovich called A Union Story in Our UUA Backyard. A union story hit close to home for a fellow UUA member congregation in Oregon. In November of 2014, the staff of the First Unitarian Church of Portland, Oregon, presented an application for unionization for their senior minister, the Reverend William G. Sinkford, the former president of the UU Association of Congregations. The application was signed with the Communications Workers of America, CWA, Local 7901. When the leaders of the First Unitarian Church received the application, it was initially rejected. At the request of staff, a phone call took place between the Local 7901 president and a member of the Unitarian congregation leadership. The First Unitarian leadership stated that, quote, U.S. labor law doesn't require churches to bargain with unions, and First Unitarian wouldn't be recognizing Local 7901. In face of the rejection, the employees persisted and kept attempting to unionize. Their persistence was particularly based on the fact that while the First Unitarian Church doesn't have to recognize a union, it doesn't mean that they are prevented from doing so, such as in the case of the clerical employees of the Catholic Archdiocese of Portland, who had been unionized for decades. The rest of their arguments can be summed up by the words of Nicole Baumer, a Sunday school administrator who was one of the union effort's leaders. Quote, "We're doing this because we care that the church walks its talk." She continues, "If we didn't care deeply about our jobs, we would choose an easier road of quitting and leaving." Though the staff of the First Unitarian Church were not ready to go public with their union push, they knew they needed additional help, so they reached out to their fellow congregation members, and a member of the church's Economic Justice Action Group, a former union member in their private life, offered to help. As word started getting out about the employees' efforts to unionize, a post on the official church website declared, "We do not believe it is in the best interest of our church to have employees cut off from direct communication with management. We believe that such an action would dramatically change the way we function at the church, taking us from a covenantal and relational basis to a contractional relationship, and making the relationships between management and staff more and more adversarial." This post was taken down a few days later, with no explanation as to why it was originally posted or the reason for its removal. Shortly after the post appeared on the website, the Northwest Labor Press reached out for comments about the post by leaving a voicemail on the church's phone line. 2 days after the voicemail was left for the church, and after dozens of emails from congregants in support of the union, the First Unitarian Church of Portland officially recognized and approved the union application. In an email to Northwest Labor Press, the church clarified, quote, "The executive team has weighed the social justice issues and our faith's long-held support of people's right to organize with how it would affect our ability to serve our congregation and its mission. While we continue to question whether unionization is the best way to achieve the goals we share, we also recognize that a continued conflict will drive us further apart and begin to change the nature of members' relationship with their church. Congregants come to First Unitarian to be nourished spiritually and to live out their values in the world, not to be forced to take sides in a conflict." Senior Minister Reverend Sinkford explained via an email to the newspaper, quote, "The issue is becoming extremely divisive in our community, with people lining up pro and con. It just felt like there was more damage potentially being done than we were willing to maintain." Reverend Sinkford also shared that there is a much-needed push among employees for raises for the lowest paid. Workers are seeking to improve wages, more affordable health care for all, written job descriptions, and the security of having conditions spelled out in a binding agreement instead of subject to change at any time. He continued by saying, This is new territory for me and for the church, and I think our employees too. So we're looking forward to sitting down and getting started. The church staff leaders expressed their thankfulness to the congregation for the approval. Quote, after 81 days of being told no, and then 4 days of emails from congregants, we know it was the congregants that made this happen. They took a stand on the right side of history, on workers' rights, and we are grateful to them for taking that stand, said Sunday School Administrator Nicole Baumer. Thanks.
Our fourth reading is by Lois Weiner. In contrast to the cutthroat competition and dog-eat-dog individualism that capitalism cherishes, unions are based on the idea that one's own well-being is bound up with the fate of others. Collective action depends on trust and a strong sense of shared interest, ideals that underlie democracy.
I'm Kitty again. And regarding where labor unions are today, you could say that the glass is either half empty or half full. Or maybe this is a both-and situation. Labor unions are more popular with the American public than they have been in decades. According to a 2018 MIT study, 48% of non-union workers polled today would join a union if they could. And according to a number of polls, 65 to 68% of Americans approve of unions. However, the number of workers in American unions has plummeted to 10.3%, compared with 20% in the early 1980s. New unions are springing up in diverse companies that have never been unionized before. The COVID pandemic made many laborers rethink their priorities and values, leading to a new appreciation of collective bargaining. It was a transformative experience for many workers who garnered public support as essential workers. But many felt the companies that they were essential for didn't step up to provide them with items needed to keep them safe or amply compensate them. More workplaces are in the process of trying to unionize. Starbucks stores, Amazon, Trader Joe's, Apple, Chipotle, and REI, and many others. There have been successes as well as failures. Here in Columbus, the Wexner Center for the Arts has been working to form a union, and just this last week, the Columbus Museum of Art announced its intention of doing so. And an increasing number of workers are recognizing the power of strikes. In some large companies, employees have gone on strikes in the last few years, including at John Deere, Kellogg's, American Airlines, and Chipotle again, among many others. The longest strike, the Coal Miners Union of the Warrior Met Coal Company in Alabama, which started on April 1st, 2021, is still going on today. To add insult to injury, the National Labor Relations Board ordered the union to pay the unscrupulous coal company $13.3 million in damages for lost revenue of unmined coal. Fortunately for Columbus, the strike by our friends and neighbors, the CEA teachers, was resolved quickly, and they and our students have been back in the classroom. As corporations become stronger, unions have been weakened. The average revenue of the world's largest and most profitable corporations has tripled, but worker pay does not reflect that by a long shot. Right-to-work legislation has been passed in 28 states. That's more than half. Right-to-work allegedly protects the workers from being required to join a union. And it actually means the right to be fired at any time without any reason. According to Tammy Kinn, Quote, short of upending capitalism, shrinking the distance between chief executives and the rank and file would require two fundamental changes. First, a reduction of corporate power, and secondly, an expansion of worker power. The compensation package for CEOs of corporations used to be about 20 times the average worker's pay. Now, in the 21st century, it commonly ranges from 275 to 300 times that, and some are more. Workers deserve better. Their unions have improved the lives and working conditions of everyone in the United States over the years. They continue to serve and defend their members and the community at large. Today, they are beginning to feel their power again, as you can see in this video from the AFL-CIO.
During the past 5 years, our labor movement has risen to meet the moment, time and time again. In the wake of a pandemic that left the country reeling, the labor movement stepped up like never before. We served on the front lines, organized food banks and crisis services.
When those essential workers rise and they want better working conditions, wages, and environments for themselves and their families, don't scrutinize them because they were once essential and they will always be essential.
We went into action making PPE for essential workers across industries. We mobilized nationwide to fight for our Workers' First agenda. We saved workers' pensions and won historic job-creating postal reform and infrastructure investment. We worked together to create the most pro-union administration in our lifetime and to elect 2 pro-worker senators in Georgia. And we have continued to push for labor law reform, voting rights, a stronger care infrastructure, a fair immigration system that leads to a path to citizenship for thousands of workers, and millions of clean energy jobs. Working people across the country have said, enough is enough.
Can't wait to get to that moment when my coworkers and I have ratified our first contract, and we can also say, hey, we did it.
We're building our collective strength, coming together to make our jobs better. And we're organizing across industries and sectors.
I have to fight for a union. I have to fight for the right to organize because it's the right thing to do.
And we are growing our movement, the American labor movement. This is us. This is now. This is our moment.
Triste lyre qui soupire, je rêve aux amours défunts, je rêve aux amours défunts. La sereine mélancolie au fond de mon cœur et j'entends l'âme même amie tressaillir dans le bois rêveur. Nuit d'étoiles sous tes voiles, sous ta brise tes parfums, triste lyre qui soupire, je rêve les vois à notre fontaine, tes regards comme les cieux, c'est ton rose, c'est ton haleine, et ces étoiles sont tes yeux. Nuit de toile sous tes voiles, tout a brisé tes parfums. Triste lyre qui soupire, je rêve aux amours défunts. Je rêve aux amours défunts.
Thank you, Carolina. That was beautiful. We are sharing our offering plate this summer with Pro-Choice Ohio and Faith Choice Ohio. First UUer Kelly McConaughey is the Development Director of Pro-Choice Ohio. First UUer Jane Larson is a longtime Pro-Choice of Ohio board member and serves on the PCO Foundation. Elena Ramsey is a director of Faith Choice Ohio, and Reverend Marion serves on the board of directors. Many first UUers volunteer supporting reproductive rights. Reproductive health care is a justice issue. The right to make decisions informed by our circumstances in conversation with family and healthcare professionals is a matter of dignity, respect, and privacy. The Supreme Court and our own state government have ruled that reproduction is not a private matter and carries the threat of penalty and imprisonment. This affects everyone, especially those in minority communities and people in economically challenging circumstances. This work is urgent. This work is incredibly hard. The work is desperately needed. Thank you for supporting reproductive rights. Please use the QR code or go to our website, firstuucolumbus.org, and click the Donate tab to share as you feel called and are able. For our offertory music today, Kristen Figg will accompany her granddaughter, Carolina Edlund, on the harp. Multi-talented young woman. They will treat us to this hymn, Bright Morning Stars, so please remain seated and enjoy their gifts to us. And also, you can disregard the words on the screen because there's been a change.
Oh, actually it has been changed.
Oh, don't disregard the words on the screen.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing seeds of gladness. Days of breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? Days are breaking in my soul. They are in the fields a plowing. They are in the fields a plowing. They are in the fields a plowing. Days are breaking in my soul.
We thank you for the generosity that you have given to the church, and we thank you for the love and generosity that you have given us musically this morning. For our caring meditation this morning, I offer Meditation on Hands, adapted from the words of Reverend Christine C. Robinson. I invite you into a space of quiet and peace, to ground yourself by noticing your contact with the chair and the floor, by sitting back, by becoming aware of your breathing. Look at your hands. They've been through a lot, these hands. They have strength, scars, and beauty. I invite you to remember that it is your hands that do the work of love in the world. It takes many, many hands to do the work of the world. Some hands hold another's hands while tears flow or congratulations ring. Some hands type letters to politicians urging changes. Some hands craft signs of protest. Some hands write poetry, while some hands write legal documents to ensure democracy. Some hands heal broken bodies or broken spirits. Some hands patiently teach, add works of art to the world that express the range of human emotion, while some hands form the cup that you held in your hand this morning. Some hands bathe children, feed elders, nurse the ill, organize communities. Some hands clean offices, streets, and airport terminals. Some hands till the soil, plant and nurture seeds, pick the crops, cook the food. Some hands stand on street corners asking for help, while some hands reach into their pocket to offer support. All of these hands are Spirit's hands, your hands, our hands. A great mystery of flesh and intention, a great potential of embodied love. This morning, I want to lift up the family of the unarmed young black man who was shot in bed by a Columbus police officer earlier this week. and the family of the young child who was found drowned in a pond of a Columbus apartment complex. Today, we sit surrounded by these many connections, both visible and invisible, that remind us every day that we are not alone. We are all connected. Peace be with us and with all beings that share this earth. I now invite Barb Fiorini, our pastoral listener this morning, to share this week's caring cards and the joys and sorrows submitted this morning. Barb.
Good morning. Please sign a caring card wishing a happy birthday to longtime former member Joanne St. Clair, who has been battling cancer for nearly a year. For further information, please contact Kathy O'Neill. Our congratulations to Linda and Stuart Smith. They are celebrating their 55th wedding anniversary with a vacation to Acadia National Park in Maine. And lastly, we hold Sue Vero and her family in our thoughts today. They are very concerned about a close family member who had to have emergency surgery and go into a rehab facility. We encourage you to visit the caring table in Beach Hall after the service to sign caring cards, whether or not you know these people. This long-time tradition of signing cards in person is an important outreach to members and friends. Thanks.
May we hold these joys and sorrows and all of those unspoken gently in our hearts. And now, as I ring the temple bell, I invite you into a moment of shared silence to reflect, to imagine, to pray, or simply to breathe. We will ring the bell a second time to continue our service. Our closing words this morning by Amy Bowden Friedman and Keith Cron have been adapted. And now, look once again at your hands. They are the tangible link that connects us to one another. Look and see those around you who have experienced so much that is life. These hands have worked, are working, and will work to make the world a better place. Go in peace, go in love, work for justice. Go and bless the world, and bless your hands as well.
Sorry. We will now extinguish our chalice. May the lessons we learn in this space be manifested in our lives. If you are online, I invite you to bring your chalice closer to extinguish our flame together. If you are in person after the postlude, you're welcome to remain seated, but go to Beach Hall on the left for coffee, hopefully, and conversation. I invite you to join me in speaking our vision statement as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of vision. As we go forth, let us heal and transform ourselves and our world through reason and love. Our flame is extinguished, but the light lives on in our hearts and lives. Please remain seated.